and welcome to this edition of EMS Now Up Close. I am Eric Miskell with EMS Now, and today it's my pleasure to speak with Vivek Khanna. He is the Managing Director of Indic EMS Electronics. As you will find out, Indic, as the name implies, is an EMS company based in India with an interesting history. So Vivek, thank you for agreeing to speak to me today, for coming on and sharing with us your story and your views of the industry in India.
Thanks, Eric, and I've really been privileged that get the opportunity to talk to you and our journey of, I'll say our because it's not me, my whole team journey of being a part of Indic. So I'll just touch base on a bit of history on me as well as on the company's perspective. I'm a engineering graduate. I was lucky to do it from the top engineering institution in India, which happened to be the only one among the top 100 institutions in the global scenario. And again, I give that whole credit to my government, because India been very, very, right from the day we got our independence, was very centric about education. And I came from a very low middle income scenario, got a good opportunity for a good education, and was privileged to focus on that. And that started my journey. And it happened to be in Bangalore, which later turned out to be a IT hub. So it could be accident, but of course, this particular institution was a big contributor for giving the right skill levels to this IT industry. And when I graduated out, I did my electronics and electrical. That's the time the companies like TI incorporated their first design house in Bangalore on a chip designing. This was a long 3 decades or more than 3 decades back journey. And I happened to get a chance to work on TI, and then later I moved it on to a computer side where it was more to do with the big mainframes, and the only work we had, like mainframes like Unisys and all that, was also work on to managing as well as working on the board level. So I got some hands-on on that. And then the whole change happened, in particular in India, on the IT side. And the biggest contributor at that time was the Y2K, because the whole global world needed at that time the people who are ready to work and a bit of experience to work on Pascal or COBOL, which is the toughest thing to do that. And India was very ready, and people like us were very keen to work to show that as a part of the services model. And rest is a history. Everyone knows the 2 decades of the software industry. So been very good. We managed to make our presence felt and compete with the Bay Area of, the US, Silicon Valley, or the Israel one on the startup mode. So this was my journey. And then I, being an entrepreneur, I also worked in, as I said, mainly on the telecom software space in companies like Bell Labs, Lucent Technologies. But then we came out and happened to do some startups. And one of the one which I did it, we managed to get acquired by Motorola. And then I had a journey of the corporate life on that. So I did 1 or 2 more entrepreneurship, but that's not important. More important is to now talk about the EMS, which you have given me a privilege to talk. But I had an interesting space on that, a mix of startups and the multinational world. And that's where accidentally, and then I changed the whole gear, because these 2 decades took me to a mid-40s, and it decided, rest, I've done enough. I've been lucky on the right space. So I went into mentoring and as well as investing into startups. And so I did that about 2 to 3 years time. And then that journey, I realized that, it's good to have that, but a lot of this startup, when we are competing with Israel or in the Silicon Valley, a big environment, the entry barrier is not being understood by the youngsters. And the second part was, I realized also the talent which India had, because, the percentage of young population here from 25 to 45 years. That was the driving factor for the technology success here. And I realized it's a time for them. So I switched it on. And then this Indic company happened, where the two Barcelona-based companies from Spain, which the Spanish government was giving them incentive to do an outsourced model. And in place of choosing in China, they decided to be in Bangalore. But in a 2 or 3 years time, I wasn't a part of it. That was in 2007 when the company got incorporated. I became a part of it in 2010 when it was in a brisk of closing down. I could understood because they thought about, the only way they thought about was a low-cost model of an outsource, which I realized was not the right cup of tea. So I became a part and took a challenge. And I also realized, being this on a countryside, I can give back to society, because I've been lucky. The 2 decades of my software IT industry, I made more than enough, and I could give the global education to my children. So very important to now do something for the society, and definitely play my golf, which I was been not getting enough time for. So that's where it happens, and countryside. And I also realized that the women folks there, they don't, not only they are semi-skilled, but also for their upliftment back at home. They can't go back to the main hub like a Bangalore city. So the way the Indian government today talks about promoting the tier 2, I thought there's so much to do on the countryside. So I became an integral part of it. And then the rest 13 years is an interesting journey. The very first thing I did was I stopped the whole outsourcing model. And I said, I also, whatever I learned in a software industry, particularly I learned that in an outsourced model, what we do it is we keep thousands and thousands, because 100,000 or sometimes 250,000 every year engineers comes out from the institutions in India every year from an engineering degree. And we use them as on a bench, we call it. We train them for 6 months in a software industry. And whenever the interesting project comes, you give them, you grab that and put them into the cycle of work. So I did that in a different phase in the EMS industry. So I'm using the colony of that. What I did was, I realized that investment is not a way to go, because it should be a self-sustained model. And then India doesn't have, when it comes to manufacturing, I was very clear that next decade will be for manufacturing in Asia, and India can play some role. So what I did was that I worked on a word which I think you're familiar in EMS industry, is a job work, where you take the whole components, the whole everything from the customer, assemble it and give it back. So here, the whole, as you said, the main challenges of supply chain, the inventory. And when I did this startup on this one, I treated it as a startup, and was that the interest rate which people talk about was extremely, extremely high. It was, you'll be surprised, when I entered, when you borrow it from the bank, it was about 14%. But over a period now, it's totally different today. It's come almost not to the level of US, but it's very much near that. So that was the journey. I had to do that. So I incorporated this job work and able to grow the Indic from a one small chip shooter and a small line to about 4 SMT lines, and make the manpower from 25 to almost about 400 people. So this is the way I created the whole journey. And then that 5 years I used it. And then I really focus on, again, another clarity I got in my lifespan is that my journey with IT was that you have to be a global player. You are used to a domestic volume game. To be a global player, you need a very good quality. There needs certain differentiation, delivery and quality on a global way. So I wanted to make a differentiations in Indic. So this is the journey. So I started looking for the global customer after, making a great platform for a, because they need validation. So I was able to do that. So that's my journey of the first 5 to 6 years, taking the big MNCs here, the domestic MNCs on a job work, and then later in last 5 to 6 years, converting it into a global one. And today that journey been changed. Presently, I'm doing almost 80% of my revenue comes from global and only 20% comes from the domestic.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you for that. That was a very extensive overview. Let me ask a few things, because some people, when you say earlier on, you said you stopped the outsourcing. Some people listening might find that funny, since you're an EMS company who benefits from outsourcing from OEMs. But what you meant there, right, was that it's the outsourcing, your own company outsourcing, that you kept the capabilities in-house and developed those. Is that how you mean that?
You clearly said it right. And I like to honestly confess that, as I said, I'm a hardcore techie, so I'll be using or mingling the words. But you're absolutely right. What I meant was that the outsourcing from your, in the sense of a parent companies was the one. But rather than that, I'm a pure outsourcing, contract outsourcing manufacturing services model. But I go directly to the global world with my capabilities of delivery and quality, rather than being a subsidiary of a Spanish company.
Okay. And
That
I
was
know
I
that,
meant.
yeah, I know that originally the history of Indic was as an Indo-Spanish joint venture. That has changed some, but you still have a relationship with Spain. Can you explain a little bit about that?
So we are more like a partner. So as I said, another very serious reason I became a part of it and invested in this company as a partner with my DG companies was that they definitely, the Europe and the US brings a very good input about when it comes to the processes and things like that. A lot of learning from that. So that been very well incorporated by my parent company, DG. So right now the partnership is, we are the one, though as I rightly said earlier, it was a company to work for DG, for DG's end customer, which we changed it. And that's why I defined it very wrongly, the whole outsourced model. But now we are the partners. I have interest into the DG company in Barcelona. They have investments and a mutual partnership with us. So we are a mutual partner.
Perfect. Thank you. Now, I do know that everything, the strategy you put in place has been working, right? It's been successful. You've had some good growth over the last few years. To what do you attribute that?
I attribute, as I said, onto the single point, understanding the global mindset. And I attribute also certain differentiations, I put it on that. The moment I said that I have the 80% women folks from my uplifting, but the other challenge comes that they can't work in shifts because, as a part of Asia, and Bangalore, we're very well known about the infrastructure challenges, So for us, I run this company on a pure single shift pattern. So my whole production happens on single shift from 9 to 5:30 p.m. The two reasons for that: one is the women who are very sincere about the work, the efficiency level. The second one, the most important, which I learned it, is that you can always encash or enhance or use the same infrastructure and the capex, right? Or, from a price factor, or I don't know the right word for that, the revenue factor. But the quality really suffers when it comes to the three-shift pattern. Because here, the whole management, I call it in a two ways, which I again use that software analogy. Production is my billable commodity, which is the major 90%. And I have a non-billable people, which is, I use the word finance, HR, logistic, including me too. I'm a non-billable commodity. I don't contribute except to do that. So I give that as a big attributor to that. The differentiation we bring, And of course, another analogy I'll put it to that is that we have not cut corners on that. We have put the state of art, uh, equipment. All my ones is on either they are the Japanese ones. I'll name it. When it comes to X-ray, the SMT lines, we use the advanced technology, the 3D AOIs, either the Japanese or the German ones. And I also attribute to, we had a vision to also not only put that, invest into a real, compete it with the global world. And which opportunity, as I said, I encashed a lot of my learning from my DG company on data perspective. Investment on the Cardex, which most of my EMS, only the tier one, I know the Foxconn and Flextron is doing. I've done those sort of, I think that has given me an enriched dividend.
Okay. As I hear you speaking, I'm thinking about what differentiates Indic, right? And you've touched on a few key things here. That your 80% global revenue is different, right? That's very. So let me ask you, kind of in your mind, what differentiates Indic from the other EMS companies?
So as I said, one is right from the beginning, when I started the journey with Indic, as I said, as a managing the whole this particular vertical, I only focused on 3 verticals. One was at that time solar, which is the renewable part. The other vertical was EV side. It was much infant stage at that time, but which we really went into that. And the third one was always the IoT, because it's an integral part. So even today, our main forte is, though we work with a lot of Japanese company, I can't name on the industrial side a bit, but our 95% revenue comes from these 3 fortes. So we invested into the coming industries once.
Okay.
So I say, sorry for that. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, and the majority of that is shipped outside of India, or how much of that is consumed within India?
As I said, majority of that, more than 90, being consumed outside India. And not only we started from that, and now we see, like, I have now, our roadmap is very different. That's why we got a very big exponential growth in last 5 years to 6 years, because these are the 2 verticals, the automobile industry, and in particular the e-mobility side of it. So we not only work on the vehicle side. For that, I work to not only the local market, as I said, more on the global market. And we also see we are looking for a very big exponential growth. Particularly, we are at this point, I can't say the names of that. There are 4 Japanese companies, and they work very differently. What they are looking for is, right now we are doing the proto part of it, but the real volume game, as per them, will come post 2030. So we are really looking for 6-year ahead.
Okay.
I think that is also a very big attributor to our exponential growth.
No, absolutely. And before I move on to kind of more general issues about the industry in India, let me ask, I know that you put a lot of importance on giving back to the community in India, right? Please tell me how you're doing that and why that's such an important part of your culture.
Yeah, we don't like to talk about it because that's the last thing you want to do when you do it for that. But as I said, for me, giving back to society, one is the first thing I did was from my own personal level, when I moved out from my IT industry, all my peers told me that it's so easy at that time. I'm talking about early 2000. It's so easy to make 3x to 5x of your revenue in an IT well-matured market while you're going to the manufacturing side. And the first thing I shared you do is I managed to create the employment. So now I'll give you a comparison sheet on that. Please, now I've been spending last 2 to 3 years in Asia market, Vietnam, Malaysia, China +1 is the global talk point. I don't want to refer that, but the other markets on that. And I realized that from a wages perspective, forget about China, which are much, much lower. We are much, much lower than them. Being in a very critical where we have proven ourselves very well on the IP side, the intellectual property. I've been working on Lucent, been getting outsourced to 4 different companies. So IP is a very strong credentials of Bangalore or Indian as such, which we have a big track record on the software industry for that. And I've been honored to be a part of that. I say that itself is a big forte. The other part you talk about is with the wages, we have a very high level, skill level people in Bangalore, right? And the youth, the 25 to 45 years people, right? Which is the biggest asset for us. So what I do it is, I need about 50 people tomorrow. And I get almost 500 people waiting for me within 24 hours notice, very keen to join me. So creating an employment from that skill level is a very different contributor to me. I contribute in many other ways. And one of the other ways I do it is, there was a particular poorest to poor people whom people were giving not only the education, the 3 days meal, 3 times meal, plus they were giving them the respect on. So I can't talk much. It's there on my YouTube. If you go to that YouTube where I do those community things, and it's very elaborately written there. But what I realized about that was earlier being very well funded or been supported by the German society. And I taken it a photo that I have done enough in last 10 years. And we as a Indic solely now responsible for supporting that. It has about 300 the poorest to poor children. And I tell you, the skill levels being developed on that is highly remarkable. So these are the small ways we do things back to the society. So
no, that's good for you. Those are all good causes, and I commend you for your commitment to doing that. And I have noticed, as I've spoken to other companies within India, that is always a big part, is the giving back, the helping to educate, the training, all that, and helping to lift other people up. And I find that very commendable. So
I just like to add a bit of that, if you don't mind it. Like
yes,
what you said just now, I'll tell you what I give it back and how I get it back from them. Reason was I had a real exponential growth of every year from 2020, 2x, 3x during the COVID time, because the industry I was in, particularly the solar side or the EV side, this was growing. So the 2 challenges, as everyone knows in the EMS industry, happened. One was the availability of the manpower. The other was definitely China being shut down on the semiconductor. So I'll tell you how we able to handle and able to grow very differently in Indic was again attributed to this manpower, because we managed to get work on the ventilators which government announced. And we were able to work it for as the outsourced model to a government entity. And because of that, Eric, I'll give you a very different analogy that from March 2020, when the COVID started, Indic has never closed even for one single day. Because also government, because we created about 60,000, we attributed into that 60,000 electronics part of the ventilators. And government supported us to be open right from March up to today. And then it's not just the government. And now I'm coming back to the people which I'm talking about, my people who work on the, who compete on the wages much lower than the other ones, is that almost 800 people were being every day coming to this office right from March 2020 till the end of 22. So, I mean, you can see the difference they brought it to that. That's where I could able to grab the global market, where the China was closed and there were challenges in Malaysia and Vietnam. And these, my European customers completely banked on me, moved a lot of their niche work to me during that phase. So for me, it was a different analogy. It was an opportunity.
Yes. No, that's
And
very
we
good.
demonstrated that. I'll go to a bit different than EMS, is that we demonstrated the same analogy on the vaccination side in 2020, when the whole world was thinking that how do we manage the 1.4 billion people who love so closely, and we know all the challenge, and how well we able to tackle it as good as a developed country. We were able to compete with tackling this COVID problem with almost at par with the developed countries. Maybe some places much better.
Yes.